Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivartikacharya Ashta His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivartikacharya Ashta Shishmat His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, text number 34. Ete varnaha swadharmena yajanti svagurum harim shraddhaya atma vishuddha artham yat jataha saha vrittibihi. You got it? 3634. Yeah, that's in there, but that's not the verse. Okay. Iti varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartam yajjata saha vrittibihi. Iti varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartam yajjata saha vrittibihi. Iti varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartam yajjata saha vrittibihi.
Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi. Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi. Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi. Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi. Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi. Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi.
Mataji.
Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi. Ete varna swadharmena swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi.
Ite, all these. Varnaha, orders of society. Swadharmena, by one's own occupational duties. Yajanti, worship. Swagarum, with the spiritual master. Harim, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shraddhaya, with faith and devotion. Atma, self. Vishuddhi artam, for purifying. Yet, from whom? Jataha, born. Saha, along with. Vrittibihi, occupational duty. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All these different social divisions are born, with their occupational duties and living conditions, from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. Purport: since they are born from different parts of the body of the Supreme Lord in his gigantic form, all living entities in all parts of the universe are supposed to be eternal servitors of the Supreme Body. Every part of our bodies, such as the mouth, hands, thighs, and legs, is meant to render service to the whole. That is their constitutional position. In subhuman life, the living entities are not conscious of this constitutional position. But in the human form of life, they're supposed to know this through the system of the Varnas, the social orders. As above mentioned, the Brahmana is the spiritual master of all orders of society. And this Brahminical culture, culminating in the transcendental service of the Lord, is the basic principle for purifying the soul. In conditioned life, the soul is under the impression that he can become the Lord of the universe. And the last point of this misconception is to think oneself the Supreme. The foolish conditioned soul does not take into account that the Supreme cannot be conditioned by Maya or illusion. If the Supreme were to be conditioned by illusion, where would be his supremacy? In that case, Maya or illusion would be supreme. Therefore, because the living entities are conditioned, they cannot be supreme. The actual position of the conditioned soul is explained in this verse. All the conditioned souls are impure due to contact with the material energy in the three modes of nature. Therefore, it is necessary that they purify themselves under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who is not only a Brahmana by qualification, but must also be a Vaishnava. The only self-purifying process mentioned herein is to worship the Lord under the recognized method, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. That is the natural way of purification, and no other method is recommended as bona fide. The other methods of purification may be helpful to come to this stage of life, but ultimately one has to come to the last point before he attains perfection. Bhagavad Gita confirms this truth as follows: Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. Om agyana timirandasya gyananjana shalakya chakshur unmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha shri chaitanya manobishtam stapitam hina putali swayam rupakadahmayam dadati swapadantikam vandeham shri guru shri tapadakamalam shri gurun vaishnavamshcha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Varganantam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shivishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Kuruna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Pre Vanchakapatu Vyasha Kripasindu Bhivajaptita Nam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putri Shmati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putri Shmati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Prasharne Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pashtyate Dushadarne Buddha Mahadbiri Mafpuro Vibor Nirmaya Shiti Yad Amusha Purasha Bungde Gunan Shudasha Shudashatmaka Salung Shishta Bhagavan Vachamsime. Translation: All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. So there's a few points here that so for context, the Varnas have just been listed, specifically Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, which are being manifested from the Virat, the universal form. And here it said, was just reiterated, all these social divisions are manifested from the Lord, and their occupational duties are also manifested. So not only what are the Brahmanas, for example, manifested, or Shudras manifested, but also the labor, the duty in which they engage in, the labor which they do, that's also manifested from the Virata form. So, thus for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. So a few points there, which I'll touch on later in the class. But Srila Prabhupada, he begins his purport in this verse by making the point that because the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, their manifestations from the Supreme Personality of God, their duty is to worship the whole, just as the duty of the arms, thighs, etc., mouth, is to cooperate together to keep the body intact. Is meant to render service to the whole, he says. So similarly, too, these divisions of society, these four varnas, they're meant to being manifestations of the of the Lord in one sense. They're meant to serve the Lord, just as the hand, leg, etc. is meant to serve the whole body. That is their position. In subhuman life, the living entities are not conscious of this position. But in the human form of life, they're supposed to know this through the system of the varnas, the social orders. So a few points here. So this varnashram system is meant to bring one to the consciousness of that one is a servant of the Lord. It's not always so. We see presently, also historically, it's possible to be within the varnashram system and be completely forgetful of the Lord. To some degree or another, inevitably, within varnashrama, the varnashram system, there's some remembrance of the Lord, even if one is not necessarily Vaishnava, because the system is just set up in such a way like that. Varnashram means Indian culture, basically, in one way or another, to put it in simple terms. And you see, everything is there, even if you're averse to Krishna, even those who are averse to Krishna, for example, the Mayavadis, still, you see, there's some sort of association with Krishna. Somehow, there's some verses or mantras either spoken by Krishna containing Krishna's names, images of Krishna, even smartas, for example, although typically they're tainted by Mayavad conceptions or impersonal conceptions, still you see they worship Vishnu regularly, or they chant mantras from the Vedas worshiping Vishnu that contain names of Vishnu. So there's some sort of contact with Krishna so long one is within the varnashram system, even if one isn't necessarily intending to do so, because the whole varnashram system is based upon the Vedas, which are emanations from Vishnu. So, consciously or unconsciously, it brings one to this perfectional point that's being mentioned later, which is worshiping the Supreme Lord. Achyutananda Prabhu, he asked Srila Prabhupada, which is better, the Christians and Jews who worship an impersonal idea of God, or worshippers of Kali. And Srila Prabhupada replied that the worshippers of Kali are better because at least they will come to the point of offering obeisances to Krishna. They may do such a thing within their lives. Whereas Christians, Jews, may or may not do so, likely not. So we understand that to even be in the lowest point of within the social realm of the varnashram system is a much higher point than even having some sort of impersonal theistic conception, which most people have. So that's one point. Second point, all these varnas, their ultimate point is to render service to the whole. So long as one is existing within the varnashram system, it's kind of theoretical, I guess, because we're in America, and even in India, most people, they don't follow, they say they come from a caste, but they don't really follow anything. There's still remnants here, there's still smarta brahmanas, for example, and there's still royal families, although practically they're not acting as such. They may have a title, but they're not really ruling anything. But if you take, for example, the case of the smartas, who are superficially following varnashram duties, a few things, they're subhumans, actually, according to Srila Prabhupada here. In subhuman life, the living entities are not conscious of this constitutional position of a servant of Krishna. So insofar one is following varnashram duties, but not worshiping Krishna, then one remains on the platform of a subhuman. Real human life begins when one actually begins to, sometimes they said inquire in the Brahman, but factually we understand that when one worships Krishna, when one accepts oneself as the eternal servitor of Krishna and worships Krishna. That is the point of the human form of life. Otherwise, the whole thing's missed. If you go through the whole human form of life and you don't worship Krishna, how can you which is the purpose of the human form of life, how can you be called a human? It's not possible. It's just like if you call yourself a musician, but you never come to the point of playing the instrument, what's the point of being called a musician? So similarly, too, humanity is like that. So these varnas, they're meant to cooperate together. A few points. Anyway, I'll get on to this point. These varnas, they're meant to cooperate together. Just as the hands, the mouth, hands, thighs, legs, they all cooperate to serve the whole entire body. So similarly, too, all the varnas cooperate together with their different duties to serve the supreme body of the Lord, or to serve Krishna. Contrary to the point of, which is less popular nowadays, I think, at least is going out of the socialist idea of equality. Actually, any society is stratified, But especially Varnashram society, we see that it's very clear that there's different grades, there's different classes, and these classes have their different duties. And collectively, they form a society, and collectively they serve Krishna like this. And everybody has their own individual duty. It's important, it's as important for the Brahmanas to teach Vedic scripture and to learn Vedic scripture as it is for the Chandalas to burn bodies in the crematory grounds. Even though Chandalas are technically fifth class people, but it's as important. Otherwise, who's going to do it? What's going to happen to the dead bodies? Such things have to be taken care of. There's a place for everybody. There has to be laborers, there must be Vaishyas. Comparatively, there's higher and lower, but they're all important, Srila Prabhupada will make the point. It's just like we're hearing, I think, either in a purport or in a class, that comparatively the head is the most important, but it's not that you give up the legs. So similarly to every varna and every duty in society is important. We can even see it within our society. Without garbage men, what would happen? Even within this mundane materialistic city, things can't go on. Without some sort of low-class laborer to work on the pipes, to pump the water into all the buildings, how could the city be possible? It's not just that some architect sitting in an office with his brain, he's the only one who did such a thing. Rather, it's all the laborers, in one sense, almost more than an architect, in one sense, who actually practically put the things together. So all things are important, even specifically within Varnashram society. This is a mundane example, but within Varnashram, everything is important. And they all cooperate together to serve Krishna. Everybody's duties are differently, and everybody has their own individual duty, and Krishna is pleased by such a system. There's this verse, Varnashrama charvata purushena paraf puman Vishnur aradhite panta nanyat tat tushakaranam. From the Vishnu Purana, it says, the Supreme Personality of God, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped at the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashrama. There's no other way to satisfy the Lord. Of course, one understanding, the understanding actually, is that not simply by Varnashram duties, not simply by acting as a Shudra or acting as a Vaishya, is Krishna pleased by that. In fact, if one worships Krishna, as stated in the Bhagavatam elsewhere, from the 11th canto, I think this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava, Ya isham purusham sakshat atma prabhavam ishwaram na bhajanti avajananti stana brashtah patantiyataha. If any of the members of the four varnas or four ashramas fail to worship or intentionally disrespect the personality of Godhead, who's the source of their all creation, we're hearing how they're manifested from Krishna here, they will fall down from their position into a hellish state of life. Literally, it says, into hell, basically. So, not simply by executing Varnashram duties does one get elevated. Of course, maybe so, but specifically, if one neglects the worship of Vishnu, specifically so is envious or disrespectful towards Vishnu, one falls down from this Varnashram position. So the four Varnas, they're meant to cooperate together to please Krishna. It's a little theoretical, but there's very practical manifestations. Of course, there's for this age of Kali, the general recommendation, the obvious recommendation is that everybody's meant to chant the holy name of Krishna. Whether he be a Brahmana, Vaishya, Shudra, whatever state of life he is in, whatever his state of purification may be, he may be completely contaminated. He may be a fifth-class person existing outside the Varnashrama system, but Tasmai Subhadra Shavashe Namo Namaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is so purifying that he can uplift even fallen people. So, of course, this duty is there for everybody, but also cooperating together, just like the Kshatriyas protect the Brahmanas so that the Brahmanas can properly do their duty. The Brahmanas, they memorize, at least traditionally, still too today is going on. They will learn in youth, as a child, they will learn the Vedas. They will learn scripture at a later point. They will study commentaries to be able to explain the scripture of it. One function of commentaries is that typically it's not that just people learn scripture, they will also study the commentary tradition they come in. Because it's Shastra directly can be somewhat difficult to understand. Even the Bhagavatam is quite difficult to understand without the purpose of Srila Prabhupada. So Brahmanas would traditionally study commentaries of their line to be able not just for their own scholarly, you could say, pleasure, but for the sake of explaining the Shastra to others and explaining the points to others. So Brahmanas would do such a thing, which requires a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to learn, memorize, and then they have also different duties, chanting Sandhya Vandanam at different times of the day, typically worshiping some sort of deity. Brahmanas often, they will cook for themselves, if not their wife doing so. So there's quite a lot of time that takes to do these things. Even ourselves, we have our morning program, and it takes a lot of time out of the day. 6 hours is a lot of time. It's practically, if you sleep 6 hours, and I mean, practically it's the same amount of time we sleep, more or less. It's a lot of time. So brahmanas require a lot of time. How does that time come? Because they're protected. Because brahmanas aren't meant to labor hard at the necessities of life to keep body and soul together, like, for example, the Vaishyas are expected to do so. Rather, the Vaishyas and Shudras specifically, they're meant to render service, take care of these things generally within society, give facility to the brahmanas, and specifically, more specifically, Kshatriyas sustain the brahmanas by giving in charity, by protecting them, etc., like this. So there's mutual cooperation throughout the society, and it's not that the brahmanas are just some sort of how to say, dictators or some sort of elitist group. Of course, they are an elitist group, but it's not that one suppresses the other. In other words, it's not that sort of misconception. Rather, because the brahmanas are allowed, given time, like the given facility, you can say like that, they benefit the other classes. They teach the kshatriya. Brahmanas are teachers. They're the gurus of society. They teach everybody, kshatriyas, vaishyas, etc., like that. They will also disseminate knowledge to shudras. Although shudras don't study the Vedas, they may imbibe Vedic knowledge in a slightly indirect way from learning from others, learning from the brahmanas, etc., like that. Of course, it's done at different levels. The learning that is imparted to kshatriyas is different from that imparted to shudras. For example, kshatriyas may be literate, shudras maybe not so. So these are all detailed points, but the ultimate point is that they all work together and sustain each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. There's a word like that. It's a win-win situation for all parties engaged. And so Krishna is very pleased to see this. In the 4th canto, we have the instance of the Prachetas. It's stated that Krishna, Hari, Vishnu is very pleased to see their mutual cooperation. So Krishna is very pleased, Vishnu is very pleased to see Varnas cooperating together to worship him, to please him. Otherwise, if there's no, of course there's this verse, dharma swanishtita pumsam vishvaksena katasuyaha notpadiyadi ratim sharamna evahi kevalam. If they simply go about and just engage in their occupational duties, the occupational duties a man performs according to his own position, varna, are useless if they don't provoke attraction to the message of Krishna, topics of Krishna. And of course, also there's the other verse that Shrama Evahi Kevalam, simply executing Varnashram duties without cultivating, serving Krishna, satisfying Krishna is simply useless. So the central point is keeping Krishna in the center with the Varnashram system and not getting overly concerned with external trappings. Of course, external things should be there, but there's a difference between an external trapping and external observances. Just like culture, a lot of culture is very external things. How one dresses oneself, how one speaks, how the music one plays, so many different aspects of culture is an external phenomenon, but it's not that we renounce it. Srila Prabhupada says here that the Brahman is the spiritual master of all other orders, and the Brahminical culture, culminating and transcending the service of the Lord, is the basic principle of purifying the soul. So these external points of even Varnashram culture, they're purifying, and they bring one, as we've been speaking, to a level of sattva guna, to where one can then understand further and further and further Krishna, basically, to come to the point of understanding Atma Tattva, and then coming to the point of understanding Krishna. So this Brahminical culture, even the external manifestations of it, is conducive to just life in general, to Krishna consciousness, but also just life in general. It's a very good mode of living. Living in the mode of goodness is much more preferable to living in the mode of ignorance, let's say. And this Western culture, modern culture, is characterized by the mode of passion and ignorance. Passion and ignorance is characterized by distress, misery, lethargy, all sorts of things that people don't want. But this Brahminical culture is characterized by the mode of goodness. Even materially speaking, it makes one happy. Of course, that's not the goal, and that can also be a trapping in itself. But even materially, Brahminical culture is superior to that which is offered by this demonic Western culture. Now, a few points that... Yeah, one other point. So Srila Prabhupada explains after this, the last misconception is to think oneself the supreme. The foolish conditioned soul does not take into account that the supreme cannot be conditioned by Maya or illusion. Why does Srila Prabhupada mention this necessarily? Well, one point is, it's always relevant, but specifically, what does this have to do with the social divisions manifesting from the Lord? Well, one thing is that within the Varnashram system, there's very little scope for forgetting oneself, forgetting this fact, because everything is based upon the Vedas. There's always knowledge that one is under the control of somebody else. Even if one worships demigods, he at least acknowledges those demigods as greater than him, having some sort of capacity greater than him. Whereas, conversely, we see in the modern culture, we see people thinking themselves God or having a very puffed up conception of themselves. It is not so within the Varnashram system. Of course, there's impersonalists there, but the layman doesn't have, it's a little difficult for a Shudra to exist in a puffed up conception of life, thinking himself God, in other words. So the whole system itself puts one into a humble position, which is the constitutional position of the living entity. By nature, he's humble. It's a spiritual quality. And also, it's a quality of a servant, as we're all servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Varnashram system also inculcates this, and with the ultimate aim that thinking oneself the servant of Krishna, the servant of the Supreme Lord, and worshiping Krishna under the direction of the spiritual master. So a few points with this. Due to contact with the material energy, jivas are contaminated. Therefore, they have to purify themselves under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, who's not only a Brahmana, spiritual master should be a Brahmana, but by qualification must also be a Vaishnava. Vaishnava, how do you explain spiritual masters which may act, which may be Vaishyas, etc. like that? Traditionally, they're Brahmanas. That's one point. Traditionally, spiritual master Brahmanas are the spiritual masters of the society. Within the modern system, it may be, and also historically, it may be so we see, it could be such that somebody taking the role within the Krishna consciousness movement of a Vaishya may be acting as a spiritual master. How do you explain that? Is he a Brahmana? Well, one point is that a Vaishnava is automatically a Brahmana. That's the correct understanding. So automatically, a Vaishya is a Brahmana. He may accept a position within the Varnashram. Actually, he's transcendental to the Varnashram system in one sense. But he accepts these roles, Srila Prabhupada would explain like this. So that's one understanding. Second point here, that for purification, one must accept the spiritual master, worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under the direction of the spiritual master. It's very important. There's many ways for worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even within the Vedas themselves. There's many methods, even within Bhagavatam, hearing, chanting, serving the feet, etc. like this. There are many processes of devotional service, how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You can worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the chanting of the Vedas, by chanting stutis, suktas, etc. like this, chanting the, learning different Vedas, learning different processes. There's Pancharatra, there's so many limbs of Vedangas that one can get into and worship the Lord by such. But that's why specifically is to be done under the direction of the spiritual master, because the spiritual master directs the disciple how to properly worship. It's just like, for example, the Vedas are there, and you can worship. Krishna is worshipped by the Vedas. You see, Brahmanas chant mantras from the Vedas, but Krishna, he gives his opinion, he gives direction to Arjuna, that enlightenment to Arjuna, that the words of the Vedas are flowery, and they mislead people. Shukadeva Goswami, in the second canto, he says the words of the Vedas are so bewildering, they mislead people into meaningless things like attaining a heavenly destination. So the spiritual master, Krishna to Arjuna, or Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, they impart the message of the Vedas, the import of the Vedas. Otherwise, the message of the Vedas is ascertainable. It can't be ascertained, as comes in a few verses later. The Supreme Personality of Godhead can't be understood by just our own efforts, our own mental efforts. So the Vedas being non-different from him, the message of the Vedas, the message of the Bhagavatam, Gita as well, it can't be understood outside of the medium of the spiritual master. Everything comes through the spiritual master. Just as Prabhupada, he will relate many times that there are many Gitas in print in the Western world before he came, but it's only after he came and commented upon it that people become devotees. Because otherwise the message of the Gita was lost. I mean, lost, but also just completely missed. So the worship of the Supreme Personality of God is to be done under the direction of the spiritual master. Otherwise, we can have so many conceptions of how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we can maybe even think those things bona fide, and they may be even verified or able to be verified according to Shastra. But Shastra also says that we have to, just like here, saying directly, we have to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the Guru. So we can't leave aside this instruction, this taking shelter under the lotus feet of a Guru. Often, we see people want to have a direct relationship with God, Krishna, God, anybody, and many traditions, just like we have this Protestant tradition. They want a direct relationship with Jesus. I'm sure there's similar movements within other religions. And even with the Krishna consciousness, we see that people reject the idea of a guru and go away because they want a direct, they end up rejecting Krishna because they want a direct relationship with Krishna. But Krishna is given the system that you approach him through a guru. There's one instance, I think in 1967 or 68, of a devotee named Ravindra Swarup, who's different from the current one. There was a separate one. He approached Srila Prabhupada one day. I think Srila Prabhupada had just finished giving class or something, and he went up to Srila Prabhupada. He started crying like anything, saying that I want a direct relationship with Krishna, something like this. And Srila Prabhupada tried to comfort him, saying, no, I want to direct. I'm paraphrasing very badly, but the essence is this: that he wanted a direct relationship with Krishna. He wanted to reciprocate with Krishna directly without going through a spiritual master. And he just basically, Srila Prabhupada tried to console him, amazingly enough. And then this devotee, who was initiated even, he just burst through the storefront door. He was never seen again. So it was happening during Srila Prabhupada's time. It still continues on like that. People want a direct relationship with Krishna, but it's not possible. Krishna won't give it. Krishna only reciprocates through the mercy of the spiritual master. Just yasya prasadad bhagavat prasado yasya prasadan nagati katopi. Without the mercy of the spiritual master, you can't access Krishna. It's only through the spiritual master one gets an idea of Krishna, even from the beginning, and one's whole devotional life continues to be based upon and through the medium of the spiritual master. That's why, after that, we have this line, Hayam Stavam Stasya Yashasturi Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. When we remember the spiritual master, our whole devotional service is based upon the order of the spiritual master and the direction of the spiritual master. And through the spiritual master, therefore, we should remember him at least 3 times a day. When I first came to Krishna consciousness, actually for some years, I didn't understand what this light meant. I could understand it like theoretically, but then I understand, yes, 3 sandhyam, sandhya, the 3 junctions of the day, morning, noon, and evening, when the sun sets, sun rises, sets, and when it's at its peak, that's when Gayatri is chanted. So that's when, at least Brahmanas, they remember the spiritual master at that time. Everybody can do so, of course, but practically we remember the spiritual master much more than that. During Kirtan, we chant Pranam Mantra of Srila Prabhupada at least. Guru Puja we observe as well. Any offering we do, just like there's some offering going on the altar now, we do so through the spiritual master. Everything is done through the spiritual master in devotional service. The spiritual master, the central point, and it's a very basic point that's reiterated often, but it's a very important point that our whole devotional life hinges on our service to our spiritual master. Otherwise, it's useless. Tamal Krishna Goswami, Giriraj Swami, he writes in his book, I'll Build You a Temple, he recalls Tamal Krishna Goswami telling to him the same point, saying that the most important principle of spiritual life is pleasing the spiritual master. It's a very simple point, but Giriraj Maharaj, he always remembered that because it clicks something in his mind that just by pleasing Srila Prabhupada, that's the essence of Krishna consciousness. Of course, there's so many other things in Krishna consciousness. There's cultural aspects, there's our own individual aspirations, which there's scope for, just like, for example, Srila Prabhupada, he was ordered by his spiritual master to preach in the West and print books. But Srila Prabhupada also preached in India. That was his own personal aspiration to do so. There was his own desire. So the scope like that, there's so many different things, but the crux is serving the spiritual master and pleasing the spiritual master. Because when the spiritual master is pleased, definitely you know that Krishna is pleased. Srila Prabhupada, he once said that we want a certificate from Krishna that this man has done something for me. So Krishna may not be so merciful as to come directly into our lives and just give us a signed certificate that I've done something for you, but practically it means doing something practical for the spiritual master. Rendering some service to the spiritual master so that at the end of our life, we can say that I did something for this person. I assisted him in some way. Then our life is perfect. Of course, there's so many services. The spiritual master, more concretely, we see Srila Prabhupada, he inaugurated so many different services that it's impossible even for Srila Prabhupada's disciples to see them to completion. Rather, Srila Prabhupada wanted so many things for his movement that it will take generations to even come to a point of establishing it, actually. It's like that. So many different things. So many things. Distributing prasad, distributing books, establishing gurukuls, establishing farms, Hare Krishna dolls. So many things are there. So many programs. I mean, nobody's taken it up. It hasn't happened. Srila Prabhupada, he called them dolls, but actually it was something more like a deity to be given to people, Westerners specifically, and told that if you just worship this doll, then it will fulfill all your desires. Nobody's done this. But, what is that? Yeah, specifically Gaur Nitai, yeah. Specifically Gaur Nitai. Although I think there's a letter about Krishna as well, but later he just said Gaur Nitai. So nobody's taken this up. I mentioned many times, but still nobody has done it. Within Chaitamrita, he said, Srila Prabhupada writes that the editors of our cookbooks should compile all of these lists, all these items that Advaitacharya cooked for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Within a cookbook, nobody's done it, at least in my knowledge. Srila Prabhupada wrote that in English. No English person, no Bengali-speaking English person has done that. Maybe something is done in Bengali, but nobody's done that. So there's so many different, these are just examples. There's so many different things that Srila Prabhupada gave, and our own spiritual masters, being servants of Srila Prabhupada, carry that forward. So there's many, my point is that it's not that the spiritual master has to specifically tell us, give us a specific order. That's sometimes the ideal within our own mind, but it's not always so. The spiritual master gives general instructions, he gives general orders. Just like it's a general order from Srila Prabhupada to distribute his books. But we see those who have taken advantage of such a general instruction. We see devotees like Bhurkupati Prabhu is the obvious example, that he never necessarily got a direct instruction from Srila Prabhupada that you spend your whole life distributing his books, but he understood that it was Srila Prabhupada's desire. It's a standing general order to all his disciples, and he took advantage of it. And he's receiving the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. He will continue to receive the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So it's not necessarily that one has to get a specific direct instruction, or rather, my point is there's so many programs which the spiritual master inaugurates, so many ways of worshiping Krishna. We're hearing about one has to worship Krishna. There's so many methods of worshiping Krishna the spiritual master inaugurates. Deity worship, so many things. So if we take advantage of one of these programs and sincerely try to serve the mission of the spiritual master through such a medium, that's the perfection of our life. If we take up the order of the spiritual master like this. Otherwise, there's so many different ways to worship the Supreme Personality of God, as I was saying. You can worship Krishna according to your own conception, but if that conception isn't pleasing to the spiritual master, it's not pleasing to Krishna. Just like you can go and chant Hare Krishna in Vrindavan as a form of Nirajan Bhajan, and superficially, from all external trappings, it looks like you're worshiping Krishna, but it's not pleasing to the spiritual master, and it's actually not pleasing to Krishna at all. It's a cheating process, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur called it. So, we have this word aparad. Apa-radha, just like we have apa-sampradayas. It's something that resembles a sampradaya. So similarly, radha, aradha means worship. So aparada, literally means it looks like it's a wrong form of worship. It looks like it's worship. It looks like Krishna is being worshipped, but actually it's just offensive, as Srila Prabhupada translates into English. So similarly, it can look sometimes within devotional service that some things may be pleasing to Krishna. We may have conceptions of how to worship Krishna, but it may be displeasing or even bordering on aparad, offensive. So we do so under the guidance of the spiritual master, according to his desires, according to his means. Because the spiritual master knows how to please Krishna. He's in contact with Krishna. He knows what's pleasing to Krishna. It's just like Srila Prabhupada would often give the example that it's very difficult to contact the president of the country. But if you contact something like, say, like his son or daughter or something like this, you can easily get access to him. So similarly, too, using the same example, the son or daughter of a person, they know how their parent is. They know how their father is. They know what he likes, what he doesn't like. So similarly, too, the spiritual master knows what Krishna likes and knows what Krishna doesn't like. He can be consulted on how to worship on practical matters as well. So, so we should very seriously consider that what the spiritual master wants for us, and we should very seriously consider how to best serve the spiritual master, and what the spiritual master wants for us, even if it's contrary to our own ideas, is in our ultimate best interest. And we should all cooperate together to serve the spiritual master, just as is said here, the Varnas cooperate together to serve the Supreme Personality of God. So similarly too, we should all cooperate together to serve the spiritual master. Krishna is pleased by such an effort, as I've quoted from the Prachetas. With Krishna, there's one letter from Srila Prabhupada where he says that basically the same thing, when Krishna sees devotees cooperating together, he becomes very pleased. So when we cooperate together to serve the spiritual master, of course we may have different spiritual masters, but in one sense, as is written in the Science of Self-Realization, the spiritual master is one. At least if you can't understand that abstract, we're all coming in the line of Srila Prabhupada. We're all coming, and it's not that our spiritual masters. Of course, there may be different moods and different, emphases given by different spiritual masters, but the point is one. And two, even within this unified vision, even within cooperation, there may be diversity. There may be disagreements that even goes on within the spiritual world. Disagreements between God brothers, disagreements how to serve the spiritual master best. Just like within a family, there's many different ideas of how to best serve the father. That's natural, but still, cooperation should go on. Otherwise, it gives the father too much of a headache, as Srila Prabhupada wrote of his disciples. There may be different cooperation. Many things could be said. I won't say so much. One thing for cooperation. Well, one thing is that it can look like there's different motives. Just like I was saying, one person may be trying to do one thing, serve the spiritual master in one way. One person may be trying to serve in a completely different way. And as has been seen, these two ways may be at odds, clashing with each other, at least superficially. So that may be there, but the central point, Srila Prabhupada, he gave, the formula he gave, is to keep the Acharya in the center. By doing so, even if inevitably there will be, even by emphasizing cooperation, and we can cite Srila Prabhupada's letters emphasizing cooperation so many different times, but that doesn't mean it's going to resolve everything. Unfortunately so, because it's natural. One thing is that in spite of doing so, in spite of disagreements, is to keep the spiritual master in the center, to keep the pleasure of the spiritual master in the center. That's the important thing. Srila Prabhupada, he writes elsewhere in the 4th canto, I forget where, that disagreements within Christian consciousness are spiritual even, if that disagreement is over service. So there's, of course, fine print to that too, but I won't go into that. But the major thing is keeping the Acharya in the center. Srila Prabhupada, he wrote one letter on how to, addressing this point, he observed that the Ramakrishna mission was going on very nicely even after the disappearance of the so-called leader, and even to this present day is going on in some form or another. Why? He said because they keep the Acharya in the center, and it has done so. It's going on even to the present day. So similarly too, Srila Prabhupada advised his disciples like that, but keeping the spiritual master in the center, things will go on, even if there's disagreements within the society. So, by doing so, that's all the points I have. Keep the Acharya in the center, please him, serve his directions, and worship Krishna, and then perfect your life. Okay, I can end my class there and take any comments, questions, or objections.
So, you were making this point about a spiritual master who may be Vaishya, but then because he's Vaishnava, he's Brahmana.
Yeah.
Can you clarify a little more? Are you saying that he was Vaishya by birth, but now he's no
No,
longer
not by
engaged as a
well,
Vaishya? Or are you saying that he may still be engaged in the profession of a Vaishya, but is also acting? And when I say spiritual master, I'm specifically asking about those who are giving Diksha, not just anybody instructing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it could be both. Just like we see, for example, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he initiated disciples, but he was working as a magistrate for some time. So both things, neither by Varna, it was coming from a Kayasta community, so neither by caste, we can say strictly, nor by occupational duties, at least at that time, according to what he was engaging in externally, but he was, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is Nitya Siddha, he's eternally spiritual, he's the spiritual master of the entire world, even if he didn't necessarily initiate disciples. But he did do so, one important point. So, what I'm referring to is both. We may see such a situation, for instance, although generally the Brahmanas, for example, okay, to establish a farm community means many different divisions, many different establishing devotees, accepting different roles of life. So it may be the Brahmanas initiate, and maybe not. Due to different circumstances, it may be such that somebody acting within a duty that requires, this is hypothetical, but I'm just speaking generally, that say acting within a duty that requires management within the farm, which is more of a kshatriya duty, or even the practical labor of helping out, tilling the fields, etc., like that, he may accept the position of a local spiritual master. It may be so. Does that work necessarily disqualify him from being a spiritual master? No, because the qualification of being a spiritual master is not necessarily the varna, although there's this point in the purport. Also, we have this verse by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that the real spiritual master, the qualification of doing so is not based upon any varna or any ashrama, rather is one who knows Krishna Tattva. That's the real qualification. Although generally these things are there. Brahmanas are the spiritual master of the society. Sannyasis are the spiritual master of society. But the real essence is knowledge of Krishna. And anybody who can inculcate that, or anybody who understands that, is a Vaishnava. And a Vaishnava is more than a Brahmana. So that's how I would clarify.
Just curious if Bhaktivinoda Thakur initiated disciples when he was working as a magistrate.
Specifically, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just curious of that timeline. Now, also I read this book by Sridhar Srinivas Prabhu a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Can Women Be Guru, something like this,
Mm-hmm.
quoting from the Bharadwaja Samhita, which is basically the text that delineates our Vaishnav form of Diksha and the qualifications for doing so and things like that. And it seems to me that the Varna occupations are meant for bodily maintenance. And the moment there is no requirement for such bodily maintenance, then that such an occupation is not carried on anymore. Specifically, the Varna occupations are almost solely carried out only in the Grihastha ashram. That being said, one who is acting as a spiritual master, if out of circumstantial need there is no other way to provide livelihood for him and his family, he may seem to accept the other professions according to his nature, in which case he may be a Vaishya. But it seems that if there is no need for such a livelihood, even if he may be a Grihastha, because he has accepted the position of a spiritual master, and because the spiritual master can accept donations and things like that from his disciple, not that the spiritual master is consciously thinking like a caste brahmana, that this is how he's going to maintain, but it seems to me that if the environment is conducive, such a person, because he's a spiritual master, is expected to have the livelihood of a brahmana and not that of a Vaishya, even though
generally that's the recommendation. Yeah.
So it seems like somebody who may, out of no need, accept such Varna roles is not qualified to be a spiritual master because they are on the bodily concept of life. This is kind of something, this, on these lines is what some of, I can't remember the exact references for this, but
Were you quoting a verse specifically from this?
I think it's mentioned there that, they have to come to the platform of being a Brahmana. But then what happens is the Brahmana only accepts the professions of a Kshatriya or a Vaishya only out of need. And otherwise they don't accept. You've heard this.
Yeah, this is in the Bhagavatam.
So technically they have to become a Brahmana to be a Vaishya. But of course it is by qualification, not by birth. But then if the circumstances don't allow them to act as a Brahmana, then they may act as a Kshatriya or a Vaishya, but they are considered to be a Brahmana. So I'm speaking specifically of those who take formal roles of being a spiritual master. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but this is my understanding. So, any comments or thoughts on that?
Well, my general understanding is this verse that regardless of what is, keep a nyasi, etc., like that, regardless of what one is, one can be a spiritual master. And of course, there's the ideal, which is the spiritual Brahman is the spiritual master of the society that's accepted. Of course, there's exceptions to that as well. The norm is one thing, but there can also be, it doesn't necessarily, say somebody is acting as a kshatriya, for instance, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't seem to necessarily, say Vaishya, which is more practical because such things can be established nowadays in society. It doesn't necessarily seem to disbar him from becoming a spiritual master, necessarily so.
Yeah, but he shouldn't continue the duties of a Vaishya if there's no need for doing so.
Yeah, there's no need for,
And then he has to accept the position of a Brahmana at that point because he's a spiritual master. And now, of course, here's where Krishna consciousness becomes transcendental, which is why I was asking if you specifically know of Bhaktivinoda Thakur initiating disciples when he was a magistrate. Technically, him being a magistrate, a salaried job, so I don't know what Varna, but my understanding is that would fall under the Shudra category.
Yeah.
But yet, there would be no fault in Bhaktivinoda Thakur doing so because there was no possibility. The circumstances were just such that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for the sake of preaching, had to take up such roles in order to become respectable in society and then also execute the duties of being a spiritual master. But I was still curious to know if Bhaktivinoda Thakur specifically initiated disciples when he was a magistrate.
I don't know specifically. One other point is that naturally the duties of a spiritual master become Brahminical. If you're to act as initiating a spiritual master, naturally, if we're to define Varna or one's social position based upon the activities they do, necessarily a spiritual master has to act in that capacity in terms of learning, instructing others, etc., like that. So one side point is that the duties of a spiritual master come along with that necessarily. So it's more of a hypothetical, but it doesn't necessarily disbar, I guess, somebody from who's engaged in that point, I guess, to bring about a resolution to this, that one who's engaged in that duty isn't necessarily disbarred from that duty, but that's a good point. They could, rather should come to that point, because otherwise they don't come to that point. The duties of a guru or incumbent go hand in hand with the duties of it's probably just writing that they're the spiritual master. They're the spiritual masters. So they go hand in hand. So if one isn't acting as a Brahmana, in other words, doesn't come up to that, wouldn't seem to be fulfilling the role of a guru. So.
Yeah, or specifically, I was thinking in the context of us establishing Varnashrama farm communities, that anyone from any Varna, when they become, as they are qualified, they take up the role of a spiritual master, the community should be set up in such a way that they're supported and that they are able to perform it in a Brahminical manner rather than having to depend on other means of livelihood, which is it's less ideal. So I was thinking in that kind of in that kind of context that,
Yeah. Who did Srila Bhaktisiddhanta take a Harinam from?
Harinam?
Yeah. Didn't he
Did he
take?
take it from Bhaktivinoda Thakur?
I think so. At a
But
young
again,
age.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his father.
His father, yeah, nevertheless.
You can, father can
Nevertheless.
give. That's very, very common.
Yeah.
Yeah. But since we're talking about a social conventional role of guru, because I'm speaking of Diksha specifically, Bhaktivinoda Thakur giving Harinam to his son would not be considered by others as being anything out of the norm of what a Vaishnava father would do for his son. But if he gave Diksha to somebody else, then that makes it a more formal social thing, if I'm,
Yeah,
for lack of
understand,
a
yeah.
better word, yeah.
Anything else?
Prabhu, in Hare Krishna. Prabhu, in devotional service, one would have personal aspirations as well, apart from the instructions given by the spiritual master. How does one look at those?
How does one look at those? Well, it depends what it is. It's a broad question. It really depends what it is. I mean, like you can go for one side of the spectrum. Say, I don't know. Say you want to learn the second chapter of the Bhagavatam. That is not out of line. I wouldn't think the spiritual master would disagree with that. He would seemingly approve of it, and it's within the scope of devotional service. Say you want to start a rock band. Okay, well then you start to get on the kind of like you start to like lose the path a little bit. So it's a broad question, and it really depends on the desire. Of course, that takes a little of self-intelligence, and it depends on specifically what you want to do and how big of a desire it is. I guess something like that. So of course, personal desires are there. We can't necessarily neglect them. We can neglect them. Some things we shouldn't neglect. Some things are natural. There's natural desires like that. So some best thing, so long as not something minor, I guess, is to just if the spiritual master is present, you just confirm it with the spiritual master. You approach the spiritual master and you ask, just like the Mahatma Prabhu, 16-year-old Mahatma Prabhu, I think, or maybe 18-year-old. He wrote to Srila Prabhupada this idea that he wanted to start a traveling rock band and make a lot of, generate funds from that and then give it to Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada wrote back saying, basically, this is a bad idea, don't do this. So, but he was thinking it was a very good idea, and he was thinking it was very Krishna conscious. But Srila Prabhupada, he gave him that clear vision, and he didn't do it. So many examples like that. So, best thing is to just check with the spiritual master and see. He can give clear vision like that. And we should also be able to discriminate ourselves as to what the desire necessarily is. I gave the example of Srila Prabhupada preaching in India. That was his own aspiration. But that own aspiration is not outside the realm of pure devotional service. Does that make sense? We can have our own aspirations tinted. Of course, Srila Prabhupada is also pure devotee, but we can, because we're conditioned, we can have our own aspirations, our own desires, and they can be tinted with material motives. So we should be able to understand that as far as possible, and if we can't fully understand it, then the spiritual master will also point it out. But we shouldn't expect the spiritual master, we shouldn't use the spiritual master or expect to use the spiritual master as a tool for fulfilling our material desires. Sometimes he may do so. It may do so if the disciple is obstinate in doing in such a mentality. We should have a sincerity within our heart, and then if we have that sincerity, we approach the spiritual master with those sorts of whatever desire it may be. Then he can give clarity on that. So if the spiritual master is not present, then you consult senior devotees. Prominence specifically is recommended. However, whatever decision, however insignificant, should be confirmed by Brahmanas, I believe Srila Prabhupada writes in the first canto. So that's one thing, or at least other devotees generally like that. So that's a very practical means, because sometimes we can be caught up in our own mind, thinking something is very good, but it may not be very good at all. So like that. Is that okay? Yes.
I want to tell you some experience, like my experience for that question Kiran asked about if you have some personal inspiration, like to do something like some service. I have also these circumstances when our god brother, like a senior god brother, he told, for you it will be maybe very good if you will go from India, like directly from Salem to Russia and you will preach and we will make this Varnashrama community together. Like Guru Maharaj will be pleased with this and although it's very nice. And another god brother told me like also simultaneously like if you will go to France, you will be it will be very pleased for Guru Maharaj because Guru Maharaj like these friends and he want to like increase the preaching center. And another person told me like another god brother, also the senior god brother, he told if he will go to South Korea, Guru Maharaj will be in ecstasy of this. And I told, okay, like 3 people, they told me like different things, but the senior and our god brothers, the Brahmanas, and I was like even not initiated at that time. And I asked Guru Maharaj directly what I should do, like should I go to France, should I go to Russia, should go to South Korea? And Guru Maharaj gave a class about discipline. In Russia, this is called like the title is discipline, and he read my letter directly in this lecture, and he told you're like a small child. I won't like this. I won't like this. I won't. Guru Maharaj spoke like this, like I won't like this. I won't like this. I won't like this. You're only running in the chariot of your mind. You should be like a bit mature. Don't be like a child. If you want to distribute books, you distribute and sell them. Why you should go somewhere else? See, this is 3 people, 3 devotees. They told me the advice. Even like you should go this, you should go this. All of them is very senior. Like it's not like only like a few years and like. But Guru Maharaj have a completely different opinion.
Yeah.
And another example also Advaita. Like,
it's like that. Often it's like that. Yeah.
Yes. You know, even Prabhupada also like. Many examples like Prabhupada can give completely different instructions for even like similar situations.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Even the same point may be there, or the same point, like the same desire may be there, but the spiritual master may respond differently according to the person because he knows each individual person. So that's another point. Yeah, that's very good.
Even the spiritual desire.
Yeah.
It looks like spiritual desire.
It can look like spiritual desire. That's the thing. It can look like spiritual desire, but because we're conditioned, it can be tainted with our own imperfection, our own anarthas and our own motives. So that's why it's always good to check with the spiritual master.
Yeah, like you're speaking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur taking salary as a magistrate, but then the point is in the absence of Varnashram, total Varnashram, the way we want. So, like Brahmanas were giving charity, if you see in Vedic examples, like they don't have to, like the previous verses also we see that they don't have to crave for their needs or anything, Means there was some position that sometimes Ramana used to give them things in charity. So, like in that case, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in the absence of the Varnashram society that we are talking in Vedic terms, so in that case, as a magistrate, he is accepting salary. So, I don't think so that disqualifies him to be a Brahmana or to be a Vaishnava as well.
Yeah, that was stated.
Well, if he's taking salary, I wouldn't necessarily say so. I mean, if he's taking salary, well, I don't know. It becomes a gray area. It's a gray area. It's difficult to understand. Just like of our own Guru Maharaj, he doesn't want his Brahmana disciples working within society or taking salary, but he doesn't take away their Brahmanical initiation. For example, he doesn't ask them to take off the thread. So it's a gray area. Yeah. I feel it's it's a little gray area. The thing is, he was certainly engaged in Brahmanical activities. It's not that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, it's not that you can just call him just straight up kayasta like others within the government service may have been. He's definitely distinct from them. Yet the unfortunate situation of the degradation of our ashram system is such that situations like that come about. And they still come about. It's still coming about today. That same issue is coming about today, that we have Brahmanically initiated devotees, and unfortunately, because of the social position, particularly in the West, they're forced practically to work in society. So what to do? Are they Brahmanas? Or are they not? They're taking salary. Brahmana doesn't subside upon everybody's salary. It's stated in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam that he is independent, but we have Brahmanas taking salary, so what is their position? So it's the awkward position. So
I think Guru Maharaj, Kalki asked that question, remember, to Guru Maharaj here.
what was the
Response is if it was if there's a need and there's no other choice, then Guru Maharaj said it's okay, but they have to try not to do that. So I think even in the current context, not just for Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but even in the current context. I had another point in regard to what you said. Another thing about the spiritual master, you were speaking about desire and the spiritual master, disciple wanting to do some service. The thing is, after a certain point of time in Krishna consciousness, generally devotees have so many services that are already going on that even if they may have desires to do certain things and this and that, it just like it
You
takes
can't
a
do it.
back
It's
seat.
impossible. There's no
You
time.
cannot
What to
do it. There's no
Yeah.
time. You're so engaged. There's not. That also happens because it. And I personally found that it's very grounding. You can say, because it's like you may have desire this that, but there's no time. There's no energy. There is no ability to execute anything else even, because what the spiritual master has given and what they've already told you to do is so much that maybe you push any desire like that, maybe sometime somewhere in the future, and it just kind of like fades away into the background, So it's a blissful experience also, and that happens. But I'm saying that a devotee should desire to come to a platform where they're doing one service and they're able to do that consistently and go on with that and be fully engaged. Otherwise, there's so many things to do in life, and there's never end to any of that.
This is another example. Another example also like Krishna Prabhu told that it's better to do service continuously, like for a long time. Like Advaita also, he asked, can I transcript the Guru Maharaj lectures because in Russian language, because we have in English, but in Russian language we don't have so much. It's usually before when this application came, this is maybe 5-6 years ago, and maybe 5 years ago, he asked can I purchase a new laptop, and we have money for a high class laptop to all these programs make these transcriptions. I told we have money, but should better ask Guru Maharaj what he think about this. I asked Guru Maharaj whether he have this idea to do something service for transcriptions. And that time we do some book distribution in Europe or something like this. And Guru Maharaj told, no, so many people they can do like this. You should do book distribution. It means you're doing book distribution, you continue your book distribution. Why are you thinking you should change something transcription is good, but many people they can do like this. Just continue this because it's also desire is good. Transcription is very required for this, especially for Russians. That not so many people can do this, but still we can have so many desires, even it looks like transcendental, but still Guru Maharaj have another vision many times.
Suresh says something, and then we can go to Mataji's the remaining time.
It also seems that Krishna will put the acharyas in certain situations so that they can lead by example. So although they're Mahabhagavats, they're seeing Krishna and everything. Obviously, they're exhibiting obviously we reference Prabhupada's life and how he remained Krishna, doing his thing throughout whatever difficulties he faced or whatever his circumstances were, and then ultimately progressed into the sannyas ashram to show this example. So you can see how to live an ideal life, and then also he's recommending often that don't even bother with as far as possible stay brahmachari.
Yeah.
Look at my my circumstances. And I guess Bhaktivinoda Thakur, although he stayed in the Grihastha ashram the whole time externally, he
left it near the end.
Yeah,
of his life.
he
He left his
dedicated
magistrate duties, and he went to. I forget that. Specifically, Puri, he definitely retired near the end.
Yeah.
But before that, he was somewhere else. But I forget. I'm hazy on the details.
Yeah, he started giving a lot more time to the writing near the
Yeah.
So
Naturally.
Yeah, right. So then, and then also it's not that it's black and white, right? there is some mix between the varnas as well, right? Like you may be, you know, you're not like 100% like performing Brahminical duties. You can be
Generally, well, there's subdivisions within a varna or caste, we can say like that, and there's comparative higher and lower castes even within, like, for example, within like Shudras. Let's say there's different divisions of Shudras. Some are more elevated, some are less elevated, but generally it's designated as Shudra. There's not so much of a gray area. Gray area happens when they're outside they're outside the system. It is pretty hard set that one is. I mean, even today, if you ask somebody from India, if you have the, I don't know how controversial it is now, but if you ask somebody from India, what's your what's your caste, they'll just outright say, I'm from this, I'm of this jati, etc., like this, and it's very clear. So we don't have that experience in America, but it's, at least from what I observe, it's very clear cut over there. So, okay, we can go to Mataji's now. Anything? Question from the Mataji side? No? Okay, Jida has something. We have 6 minutes.
Dayananda Prabhu was just to like, I don't know what you were saying, but Dayananda Prabhu was saying how even within like the Vaishya community, there are Vaishyas that oversee the land more and kind of act as Kshatriyas. So like within those subdivisions, they're not.
There's
Kshatriyas,
leaders
yeah.
within any group. That's natural.
Yeah, that's natural.
Yeah.
Even among dogs, there's
But there's no mix of the varnas.
Yeah, no mix of the varnas.
No.
But it's like Vaishyas can still have some like leadership qualities.
Yeah, but they're still Vaishyas.
Yeah,
That's
they're still
natural.
Vaishyas. Yeah, yeah.
That's natural. Just like some Kshatriyas are more greater leaders than others. Some Brahmanas are.
Maybe administrators of other brahmanas.
Yeah, exactly. It's a natural inherent characteristic like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean. Like a Brahmana may be very heroic. Heroism is a Kshatriya quality, but that doesn't mean he's become a Kshatriya because he possesses that quality. So.
I also had a question. Maybe the answer could be short. I don't want to
Okay,
open
yeah,
up
we have-
Pandora's box.
Yeah, we have 4 minutes.
Yeah. So you were talking about like even within like we should cooperate, but even in society, in devotional society, devotees will have their differences. I was just wondering, like, regarding these controversial points, gender issues, transgender, whatever controversies are going on within ISKCON, you know, devotees feel strongly one way or the other, usually. And, you know, without, like, going into these issues specifically, someone may deviate from Srila Prabhupada's vision on these issues, but there's still maybe a much senior devotee to us, or to myself. So I'm wondering, like for instance, gender issues. A devotee who's much senior to me may feel women should be Diksha gurus. How should I see that devotee? Because this is like a contamination of modern ideals.
Yeah.
So how should I see that senior devotee?
Respectfully, I mean, any Vaishnava we treat with respect, even if we vehemently disagree with them. We always treat Vaishnavas with respect, otherwise Vaishnava aparad comes about. One thing is that there's different degrees of seniority. Seniority within a Vaishnava society is also, one thing is age. Say somebody comes here, he's very new to the movement, but will you treat him with respect because he's physically older? Another thing is that seniority is governed by years within devotional service and also one's philosophical understanding. One may spend many years in devotional service, but render no service and be completely deviant or could not understand the philosophy at all. Just because he got initiated doesn't mean he's become senior necessarily. We still may offer respects like that, but it doesn't mean as Prabhupada said of Jesus Christ, is we offer we offer him respects, but it doesn't mean we accept his philosophy. So we can offer them respects, but it doesn't mean we have to accept their philosophy. So yeah, that's one thing. But basic point is treating with respect, how to view them. Just, understand that what your own understanding of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, what your guru, own spiritual master is, his understanding. Ultimately, we accept the position of our own spiritual master in the end. Our spiritual masters, God brothers may disagree, but so does Srila Prabhupada's God brothers. But it doesn't mean Srila Prabhupada instructed his disciples. Srila Prabhupada, he labeled his God brothers as envious. But it's not proper for us, for example, to think of them in such a way. Of course, discrimination should be there at the same time. It's a fine matter, but above all, respectful dealings are always the most respectful dealings, and also just discrimination, in other words, and not being influenced by their ideas. So, like that. It doesn't necessarily mean because somebody's very senior, they've understood what Srila Prabhupada wants. We see, for example, Guru Maharaj writes this in Buddha Mission, many early disciples who had much extensive association with Srila Prabhupada completely misunderstand what Srila Prabhupada wanted for this movement. We see, for example, one who joined, I think in 1967, there's multiple statements like this actually. One saying that like all your books together, like Srila Prabhupada directly stated, I'm within my books, you can associate me with me by reading my books. But an early disciple had much association with Srila Prabhupada, says, your books aren't the same as you. Another one says that all your books together cannot compare to like a moments of your association. That's not what Srila Prabhupada said. I accept what Srila Prabhupada said. They may have had so much association with Srila Prabhupada and spent so many years in the movement. They're glorious for doing so, and they're worshipable for me in that aspect, but I don't accept that. So it's a little bit of a weird area, but it's things we have to navigate, so like that.
Anyways, the culture also is such that Vedic culture asks us to, respect even the enemy when he comes to your house.
Yeah, it's true. It's like that,
And then, the Vaishnava has to give respect to all living entities. We have to offer obeisances to Mayavadis. It's like Mayavadi sannyasis.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even
so there's a lot of
Mayavadis.
things like that,
So, okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.